Welcome back to week 11 of the head coach episode of Free Tendies. I'm here with Yanni. How's it going, man?
How you doing, buddy?
I got my ass kicked in fantasy last week. Bad week. Lost to you. I guess I need to get better at this. um, but at any rate, we'll get into the game breakdowns. And since you defeated me in our matchup, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, that was humiliating. I would not have taken this call if I were you. Okay, Redskins at the Eagles. Redskins with an implied team total at 22.5. Eagles with an implied team total at 26. I'll just start with the Eagles because this is going to be really boring for the rest of the season. Ted was really big on this year. He said any single draft where Jalen Hurts is there in the fourth round, I'm probably just taking him. At that 3-4 turn, there were a lot of debatable guys. I think he was absolutely correct. To me, it looks like Jalen Hurts is clearly the QB1 rest of season. He's really ascended his fantasy game to like a level that's unbelievable. And I know we still have, Allen, you still have Lamar up there. Even Jaden Daniels has tailed off a little bit, but if you catch up, to me, clearly going into this offseason, even with Devonta Smith's bad last week, look, whether it's Goddard, whether it's Saquon, whether it's Smith, whether it's AJ Brown, you wanted pieces of this Eagles offense because of the upside, and they're really showing it in every facet of the game, whether it's passing, whether it's rushing the ball, whether it's the quarterback play. Jalen takes some of Saquon's work at the goal line. Doesn't really matter. They're both fantastic. I would guess for the rest of the season, this is what it's going to look like. Start every one of your Eagles wherever you possibly can. For the Skins, little bit of a bummer that he hasn't really like dropped off massively. He had his worst game of the year last week from Jaden, but that was a really tough defensive matchup. He should be able to move the ball on the Eagles at the minimum. He should have the game script where he's going to have to. Terry's probably looking forward to playing the Eagles for the first time in his career with a competent quarterback. We're starting Daniels, we're starting Terry, we're starting Robinson Jr., and we're starting Ertz. Ertz is obviously more of a tight end streamer, but he had I think he had 9 targets last week. I with the game script, with the little revenge game narrative, all that stuff going on, I'm totally comfortable with all the tight end injuries, with some of the buys. If you need to stream and you have Ertz on your wire, throw him in there. You're good to go. We're gonna sit LMC Noah Brown, even though if you want to spend want a DFS captain, if you're one of those guys that likes to do the cheap captain, Noah Brown's maybe an interesting cheap captain. And then your sort of tricky decision is going to be Eckler. Eckler got plenty of work. I think he had about a 17 or 18 point half PPR game last week without Robinson Jr. back, but Robinson Jr. is back. He'll get his dump off passes. If you're in an emergency situation, you need to throw someone in flex. I wouldn't be surprised to see him get like 8 to 10 half PPR points this week. That's really it, though. I wish I had more to say about the Eagles. The only thing I have to say is if you draft them, you made the right call. Good job buying into a premium offense with premium players right into a championship.
Yeah, definitely. I've kind of been a big Eagles guy all year, mostly from their offense, right? I kind of called their defense a little bit suspect. Coming into the year, I thought they were very susceptible to the pass, but I think Cooper DeJean, honestly, ever since he's been in the lineup, there was the week Nick Sirianni shaved his head is the week they put him in. He's been just flashing, man. I think last week he was like rated the #1 rookie in the NFL for like his week 10 performance. And the Eagles have not lost since he's been in there. So they're kind of turning the corner here. I'm really interested to see what this Redskins team can do against the Eagles. In theory, they should have success here offensively, but to Yanni's point, I think that the Redskins have kind of not fallen off, but they aren't playing their best right now, especially on offense. So this would be a great matchup. Excited for a good Thursday night game for once. Next, we got the Jaguars going into Detroit to play the Lions. The Jaguars have an implied team total of 16.5 points, and the Lions have an implied team total of 30 points. So Vegas is hanging a 13.5 point line here. This is by far the biggest line of the year. For the Jaguars, we're tricky decisioning Evan Ingram and we're sitting everyone else. And then for the Lions, we are starting everyone except for Brock Wright, who is a tricky decision if Sam Laporta is out. If Sam Laporta is in, don't bother starting Brock Wright. We'll start with the Jaguars first here. This is very simple, right? Mac Jones is going to be starting again this week. They've already ruled Trevor out, and Mac is not good at football, guys. I in one league I was forced to stream him last week. It was super flex, and it was either going to be like Calvin Ridley or Mac Jones, and I was like, I should probably take the quarterback shot. He got me 6 points with a quarterback sneak, 1.5 points. Other than that specific score, so He's just really bad. He's just really bad, and all of the Jaguars pieces on offense are really suffering. Brian Thomas Jr. eats on that down the field type of stuff, right? He's not getting that with Mac Jones. The only guy who is getting even relatively decent work is Evan Ingram because he's running that short over the middle stuff, right? That's where Mac is comfortable throwing the ball. I don't think that Evan Ingram's going to be a locked in tight end one this week, right? But I think that there's a chance that he gets volume in a blowout and garbage time to get to like between 7 to 10 points, right? And that's enough for tight end consideration if you have a guy on bye or injured or something, right? Then for the Lions, that was a tough one against the Texans on Sunday. I think they probably should have lost that game. I'm actually amazed that they won. I think it's a testament to this team and the culture that Dan Campbell has built. I like to make fun of Dan Campbell. His X's and O's and his incessant going for it on two, I think, cost this Lions team last year and at certain points. But man, those guys are playing. They believe in the locker room. We're starting everyone there is to start. The only real asterisk on this, right, is the Sam Laporta issue. He left the game on Sunday with a sprained AC joint. These AC joint injuries, they can linger, right? Like that's something that if you're playing after injuring your AC joint, you are playing with pain. It's shut down quarterback seasons. Like Kyler Murray got shut down, I think, 2 years ago from an AC joint sprain. Obviously, a quarterback has to use their shoulder a lot more, right? So that makes more sense. My thought on this is that Sam Laporta is probably going to miss this week. I'm operating under the assumption that he does, and if he doesn't, then that's great, and I can start him here. But you know, if you're a Sam Laporta manager and you just really like the idea of a Lions tight end, you can go get Brock Wright for 1 week if you feel like you need him. I personally am of the opinion that the Lions will just ride their other guys, right? Like they have enough studs on their team where if Laporta misses, I think his volume will just go to like JMO or something, right? But yeah, they should be a drubbing here. Lions going up against a bottom three unit on defense and like the almost last place unit against the pass. Sign me up. Get everyone in there. Thoughts on this one?
Nah, nothing to say. Pretty straightforward.
Would you move Brian Thomas Jr. now, or would you try and hold on to him for the stretch run?
I don't think you can move him, dude. Like I had two rosters where he was like an integral part of what I was doing with him, and I'm pretty bummed. I think it's done. Whoa, I'm trying to think of like who you could even get for him.
Maybe JMO. Would you trade him for JMO?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Oh, not even close. Yeah. Yeah. Take him. Take him.
For rest of
Um,
season too. Like how long is this Trevor thing gonna linger? I honestly have no idea.
they had initially said he's looking like being out for the season.
Oh,
So like I don't and like if they're losing a bunch, it's in the franchise's interest to lose as much as they can and try to get that 3 first round package to move up, if they get high enough in the draft board. I don't think so, dude. They just paid him $250 million. Like he goes out there and risks it. But I've seen range. They haven't put him on IR, which is kind of weird, right? But
mm-hmm.
I've heard multiple people say they think he's out for the year.
Well, right now the Jaguars are in the number one draft position. If they lose out, they do get the number one pick. I would be interested to see if they go quarterback if they do that. That would be insane with Trevor's
They can't.
contract.
They're screwed. They can't. What they would do is trade out though and get 3 1s and maybe save the horrible quarterback contract they have. Yeah, no, but no, I would offload Brian Thomas Jr. for peanuts at this point if you could get it. Like I would rather have Tillman the rest of the season.
Fair enough. All right, next one.
Okay, Packers at Bears. God, man. I've seen a lot of. I'm on. I highly recommend the Meme War pages on Reddit, and I'm on the NFC North Meme War. And Packers fans are getting rowdy this week. Packers with an implied team total of 23. Bears with an implied team total of 17.5. Bears are obviously on the cold streak of all cold streaks. Really incredible to think they were a Hail Mary away from being 5-2. And how different would the conversation around this team be if they were 5-2 with a win over one of the best teams in the NFC? That's what football is. A fingertip bobble of a ball may have swung the destiny of the franchise this year. I don't know, but pretty crazy because from what I've seen on social media, the Packers fans are expecting a bloodbath here, and I think I am too. And again, do the Bears first because there's not a lot to say. You are not starting anyone on this team but Swift. Swift has been productive enough. He's gotten the volume enough. He's looked really good. They seem to be inclined to use him a lot. The Packers have a soft rush defense. I think Swift is an excellent start this week, but I cannot in good conscience tell any of you to go out there and start Caleb Williams, to start DJ Moore, to start Odunze, to start Keenan Allen. I really cannot. They'll have a new OC in there, but the new OC absolutely decimated Bryce Young's offense last year. I have no faith in him. I have no faith in the franchise, the ownership, the coaching. It's a dumpster fire. So I would rather have no piece in it. Maybe that changes. Maybe Caleb comes out and has 70% completion, 280 yards, 3 touchdowns, and we get an idea of who we want moving forward. I actually am not comfortable dropping any Bears yet. I have 2 Odunze and a Keenan Allen share. I'm just sort of sitting on him. I think you should sit on him for one more week, but please God, don't put him in your starting lineup this week. Put Swift in. For the Packers, kind of a run funnel defense, and I understand the Bears have been particularly good against the pass here, but we're expecting a pretty big offensive showing from the Packers this week. So in that vein, we're starting Love, we're starting Kraft, we're starting Jacobs, we're starting Reed, kind of the 4 guys you're pretty comfortable starting every week here. Unless Love gets injured, he's been like a mid-range QB1. He's is he the elite player the media thinks he is? I don't know. Ted's pretty sure he's not. I'm sort of sit on the fence with that one. But for fantasy, he's good. He's good. And then Reed, I know, has had a little bit of up and down, like very recently, but make no mistake, that's a fantastic player. He's a baby Debo out there. And Jacobs, I think Jacobs should have a tremendous week this week. I know he's been questionable here and there. He's done that all year, and then he's rolled out there and started. And Jacobs is actually having a really sneaky, underrated bounce back year this year. And then I don't want to start the other wide receivers. I have no interest against the secondary. Especially between the game script and between the secondary. It's on the road. Maybe you get a little bit of inclement weather in Chicago. But, don't start Watson. Don't start Dobbs. Keep them on your bench, because if one guy gets injured of that trio, the other one's going to be tremendously valuable. I actually am trying to hold on to those guys where I can, but don't start them this week.
Yeah, I'm just going to harp on this Bears thing a little bit more because this team has hurt me deeply this year. So the Bears right now, they have gone 21 straight drives without a touchdown. That is the record in the NFL this year. It to me, I've watched a lot of Bears this year, and I was texting Yanni. I was like, I hate that. Watching this team is like torture. To me, I don't think it's entirely on Caleb Williams. This Bears team, they surrendered 9 sacks to the Patriots on Sunday. The next worst performance against the Patriots defense allowed 3 sacks. So we're getting a ton of things here. We're getting terrible O-line play. We're getting Caleb holding on to the ball too long. We're getting the receivers not finishing their routes, not getting open. Shane Waldron, I think, was a bit of an issue. He's gone now, but if you drafted Caleb, right, like, and you have an option to maybe go get a Drake May off waivers if he's still there, I'd do it at this point. I have one roster where I drafted a Caleb and DJ Moore stack, and that roster is too tied to the success of that stack. I can't do it, but I would be benching DJ Moore and cutting Caleb Williams if I had no choice. Does that mean the Bears will never get better? I don't know. I think that we have to just lower the expectations of this entire offense, at least for the rest of this year. If they start playing good, you might be pleasantly surprised, but I would be viewing DJ Moore, who is supposed to be the premium pass catcher on this team, as a low end 3 at this point until they show you something different. Packers probably love anytime interception, but I don't think it's going to matter if the Bears can't score. All right, next we got Jimmy and the Rams going into New England to play the Patriots. The Rams have an implied team total of 24 points, and the Patriots have an implied team total of 19.5 points. For the Rams, we're starting Kyron, we're starting Cooper Kupp, and we're starting Puka Nacua. Then we're going to tricky decision Matt Stafford. Then for the Patriots, a little bit more fun to watch with Drake May under center. We're starting him. We're starting Ramondre Stevenson. Then we're going to tricky decision Hunter Henry and Pop Douglas. So let's start with the Rams first. This one's very easy, right? Like, I get that the last 2 weeks the Rams haven't looked right on offense. I don't know what it is. Puka getting kicked out of the first game against the Seahawks in the first quarter probably didn't help, right? I think the Rams had like 5 field goals or something on Monday night. Like, so they're moving the ball. They're just kind of having that Niners issue in the red zone. I don't think that's going to be sticky. I think there's too much talent on that offense to not get it together. I get that there's some linemen hurt. I get the Rams have their flaws, right? But your three studs, Kyron, Cooper, Kupp, and Puka, you just have to start them. And then we're going to tricky decision, Matt Stafford, based on that logic, right? The Rams, the last 2 weeks, they just haven't looked great. In this Patriots team, they're coming off a 9-sack performance. Do I think they can do that to Matt Stafford this week? No. I think Matt Stafford's going to get rid of the ball a lot quicker, but hell, man, Patriots defense, hats off to them. When they have won games, it's on the back of that unit. For the Patriots, Drake May, we're starting him here. This Rams team, they're really, really bad defensively. Tua had a bad game against them, but I don't know if that's just rust or what the deal is. They still give up points, right? They still give up a lot of them, and Drake May has that rushing upside that will get you there. So I feel comfortable starting him as a low end one this week. I think anywhere in the neighborhood of 17 to 25 points is on the table for him. Ramondre Stevenson, he is the engine of the offense. There are certain weeks where he gets just totally phased out of the game by dominant defenses, right? When the Patriots struggle to move the ball, like Ramondre has those ugly, like 10 carries for 15 yards games. I don't think this Rams defense is one of those units that's going to be able to keep him down like that. So I think he's going to be getting the ball early and often. He's had elite RB1 usage. It's just kind of the team that he's on has been hampering his production a little bit, but I think the arrow's pointing up on him. Then for Hunter Henry and Pop Douglas, we're going to tricky decision them because I just think it's inconsistent, right? Like they're still tied to a rookie quarterback. Granted, he's a promising one, but there are weeks where Drake May, he is not passing a bunch, right? I think that Hunter Henry and Pop Douglas are clearly the two guys you want to own in this passing offense. I think that either week, one of them is liable to be the leader in targets. If there's going to be a passing touchdown, I think it's most likely going to be to one of these two guys. Am I confident enough to say lock them in, start them? Probably not. But I would feel good. I'd feel pretty good about either of them, right? Pop Douglas in the flex or Hunter Henry as a low and tight end one. I think that's fine. Thoughts on this? You think we see Jimmy this week?
No, no, I don't. No, no, man, you got it. I guess just one small thought. I do want you guys to be stashing May and Douglas where you can. And Henry too if you need a tight end, but particularly May and Douglas, I think have real upside. If by the end of the year, like if you're on those rosters that are rotating a quarterback, I would go and put May in the rotation, try to keep him on your bench. I have high hopes for him in fantasy upside.
Have you been paying attention to Niners Twitter this week? We signed Pat O'Connell, the punter, and they're saying that he looks like Jimmy G with plastic surgery. You think Jimmy
Love
G
it.
like went to his like LA doctor and got a facelift to come back on the team to steal our mojo before the Seahawks?
Just yeah, they just needed a little cancer in the locker room, so they called the ultimate locker room cancer. Yeah, yeah. Okay, Browns at Saints, the Jameis Winston revenge game. Browns with a 21.5 implied team total. Saints with a 23-point implied team total. Little surprised to see the Saints favored, but I guess they looked good last week. They beat the Falcons. They're at home. For the Browns, you have a really nice and concentrated pass, even though the other guys actually are getting targets and stuff. To me, production wise, it's really Njoku and Tillman since Winston has taken over. We were checking it before the game, and you'll see him on our sort of tricky decision, right? We're gonna have Judy down there. Judy and half PPRs actually had over 10 points, both of Jameis Winston starts and 19 targets. Moore has had 21 targets since Winston came in over 2 games. That's been really good. But the guy that's been getting the air yard share, the first read target share, and the red zone work is actually Tillman. And I don't know. Maybe I'm getting a little too excited after 2 or 3 games. Tillman looks like a really good football player to me. I'm really high on him. I went out and dropped some fab on him in leagues where I needed a flex-worthy receiver. And then Chubb. Chubb has gotten, I believe, 19 touches and 15 touches. I don't know if that includes targets. I know, but he's somewhere in there. He's averaging between 15 and 20 touches a game. And our thinking with having those three as starts is the Saints are a really soft defense, and they're going to put up enough points that the Cleveland's going to have to keep up with them. I really like Chubb and Njoku or Tillman, roster dependent, obviously, but all of them I think have a nice plus matchup this week. I think they have a nice plus week relative to their production. Tillman to me, I'm going to look what his DFS price is. I looked through my rosters. I'm trying to force him into my lineups this week. I actually think it's that good of a matchup for him. The Saints have been really soft against receivers. And then, related sort of tricky decisions, Jameis, Judy, and more strictly DFS, not redraft. Jameis probably, again, strictly DFS. I would imagine he's going to be between $5,500 and like $5,800 this week. He might even be between $5,000 and $5,500 on DraftKings. But Judy, again, man, if you look, I don't know, some rosters are just so decimated this week. You have the buys aren't terrible this week, but some rosters are really, really banged up. If you're banged up enough, I think Judy's a perfectly reasonable flex, dude. Perfectly reasonable. You'll probably get at least 7 to 8 points. You're hoping for 12 or 13. He's landed at, between 10 and 11 the last 2 weeks. So that's he's a tricky decision for us. For the Saints, the only Saint I'm really starting with confidence is Kamara. I know Taysom Hill had that 80-yard touchdown called back, but we kind of know what Taysom Hill does at this point. What he does is he makes us think he's going to be fantasy relevant and then drops off for weeks, and then has a spike week and drops off for weeks. If you feel like chasing that around, if you're streaming a tight end this week, maybe, but we're sitting the rest of them. I know people might say, well, Taysom Hill, but I just don't ever want to start Taysom Hill. I don't ever feel good about it. This is against a stouter defense. I know Marquez Valdez-Scantling had a giant week last week. I think he had like 140 yards and 2 touchdowns. I don't expect that again. This is a competent defense. This is Jim Schwartz coordinating here. So we're only starting Kamara for the Saints. That's what I got.
I think for Taysom Hill, right? That's one of the players that exists that I think feels much better on a best ball roster if he's your tight end, right? Like his not daily fantasy. If we're doing like weekly, like home league type of deal, like it's going to be hard to project what he does on a weekly basis, right? You could throw him in there if you're feeling lucky, but I wouldn't. I think this Browns defense is still very good. They've been playing pretty well, honestly. Then for the Browns, I just kind of want to touch on this wide receiver thing a little bit. Since Jameis has taken over, Tillman, Judy, and Elijah Moore. Sorry, I wanted to call him Sky Moore for some reason. They've all had like very similar targets, right? I think they're all floating in like the low 20s in targets. So I think that when we see the production being how it is, right, with Tillman at the top, Judy in the middle, and Elijah Moore at the bottom, I think that's kind of indicative of the player that they are, right? So yeah, they'll have plenty of opportunity here against a team. I think the Saints might have used up all their juice last week against the Falcons. I would not be shocked to see. This is kind of what happens. We talked about this on the gambling show last week, right? The dead cat bounce happens after a team fires a head coach, where they usually perform pretty well or above expectations the next week, and then after that, you start seeing the lack of leadership in the locker room, right? Like, I don't know. The new Saints head coach was talking about how he got to the building or whatever right before the game on Sunday. He went in the head coach's bathroom and immediately clogged it, and he's like, "Oh, this is gonna be a shitty day," right? So I don't know. He seems more of like a get him up for one game type of deal, right? He's a special teams coordinator. He has no experience really as a head coach or coordinating games. I think we might see it here. I think the Browns is an amazing pick. ATS. That will be a pick on the gambling show for me. All right, next you got Sam Darnold and the Vikings going into Tennessee to play the Titans. The Vikings have an implied team total of 22.5 points, and the Titans have an implied team total of 17 points. For the Vikings, we're starting Justin Jefferson, Aaron Jones, and TJ Hawkinson, and we're sitting Jalen Naylor, Jordan Addison, and Sam Darnold. Sorry, buddy. Then for the Titans, we're starting Calvin Ridley and Tony Pollard, and we're sitting Tajay Spears and Bill Levis. So let's start with the Vikings first here. They had a very bad performance on Sunday. They lost Yanni a bet on the gambling show. Sam Darnold threw 3 end zone interceptions. It was just really a poor performance from him. I think over the last month, Sam Darnold has like 6 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. Is he turning back into a complete pumpkin? I don't know, but this Vikings team is still 7-2 and very well coached. But based on this idea that Sam just has not looked the same as he did the first month, we're only starting the big dogs. Feeling confident starting the big dogs against a pretty good defense in the Tennessee Titans, and that is Justin Jefferson, T.J. Hawkinson, who, by the way, led the team in receiving yards. I say wheels are up on him. Just roll him out as a tight end one rest of the season, and then Aaron Jones, who he left Sunday. He had like an injury, but he came back. He's played a really good season. No reason to believe that he won't do well here too. Then for the Titans, Bill Levis came back last week, and honestly, he looked better than I thought he would. He played a clean game, which is something he has not done all year. I think it was like 175, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, and like 40 yards on the ground. We are sitting him this week, though, just because this Vikings defense, they have played pretty well this year. I still think that they don't have the dogs on defense, but I think that they're being coached well and they're playing well. So Will Levis, he may show up on STD later in the year, but not this week. Same with Tajay Spears. Last week was an interesting one. Tony Pollard went down in the first quarter. I think he like twisted an ankle or something, and Tajay Spears, I think he had full run for like 2 quarters or something like that. I believe he had like 7 carries, 50 yards, another 3 catches, but then Tony Pollard came back in and finished the game off. It looks like Tony Pollard is going to be playing this week. And as far as we know, right, it's still Pollard's job with like a sprinkle of Spears on the side. So we're handicapping it that way. We're starting Pollard and sitting Spears still, but if Spears is on your waivers, go get him just in case he starts getting more work here. And then Calvin Ridley, he's been sneaky good, man. 22 points last week, 2 touchdowns. With DeAndre Hopkins out, it's either him or Nick Westbrook-Akine catching the ball, and Ridley's a lot more talented. He's kind of getting like the Deontay Johnson type of workload on the Titans, where he's the only dude out wide who can do anything, right? So he's getting like a 30% target share. I think that Ridley could be a league winner for you guys down the stretch here. The Titans schedule after this game is unbelievably soft, great for wide receivers and quarterbacks. And if Will Levis starts playing at least decent football here, Ridley's going to be a weapon going forward.
Okay, an interesting game. I'm curious to see. Really, the Dolphins need this win in a big way, and I'm curious to see if we finally see the offensive explosion we've all been waiting for the Dolphins this year that we really haven't gotten. Raiders 18.75 implied team total on the road. Dolphins 25.75 implied team total at home. For the Raiders, pretty straightforward. I believe Brock Bowers leads the NFL in receiving yards for tight ends. I think he's just ahead of George Kittle. George has far more touchdowns, but I don't think he's still on pace for it, but he was really close. He was pacing Puka Nacua for the rookie receiving record for receptions. Excellent player. You're never not starting him. Should be a fantasy asset that defines leagues for the next 8 to 10 years. Start him this week. And then Myers, I know this is a pretty good secondary. I know Jalen Ramsey is a tough matchup for anyone, but he's had an amazing target share since Davante Adams left, and it should continue. There's no reason for it not to. And Minshew's at least competent enough that he's been getting him the ball enough. And to me, I'm totally comfortable throwing Myers as an emergency wide receiver too, as a weekly flex, whatever you want to call it. Be perfectly good, man. Start both of those guys. Sit the rest of your Raiders. Madison had kind of his period for about half this year where he was a fantasy relevant asset. And then I came on here and asked you guys to please trade him away. And that's what I did with my Madison shares. I hope you did, because the second Zamir White came back, now Zamir's getting stat lines like 3 rushes for 11 yards and a touchdown. And Madison's getting like 30 or 40 obscure yards. The running game is not fantasy relevant this year. And it probably will not be for the rest of the season if they both stay healthy. And then for the Dolphins, Jonnu Smith is a guy I want to highlight. Quietly, sneakily getting a really healthy usage in this offense. Everyone, like, he's kind of a guy over the years that you've thought will be relevant. He actually, I believe, outscored Pitts 2 years ago when him and Pitts were on the Falcons together. And, just an interesting tight end that they seem really inclined to feed the ball to. So I think if you're looking for a streamer this week, he's a fantastic start against a soft defense. In full PPR, I think he's like averaging like 9-10 points a game. Like, he's been a perfectly reasonable tight end and someone who I probably should be rostered. But this week we're calling Tua, we're calling A-Chain, we're calling Smith, Hill, and Waddle. All of them are starts. I know Waddle's fallen out of favor on a lot of people's rosters. So I had a roster where I was looking at, do I want to start Waddle or DeAndre Hopkins? And I actually ended up trading DeAndre Hopkins. So I'm going to start Waddle. But I had a really tough decision. Do I want Waddle or DeAndre Hopkins? So he's sort of in that tier of guy for me. I guess maybe I'm higher on Tillman than everyone else is, but he's like, above the Tillman tier. Whatever you're looking at for wide receiver, I would start Waddle over Shakir this week, who's been a really good wide receiver. So he's sort of in that range, right? The low end wide receiver 2 with mid-range wide receiver 2 upside this week. I'm perfectly comfortable having him in my lineups. And then your sort of tricky decision is going to be Mostert. This is basically, he's a touchdown dependent flex. It looks like they've been working Jalen Wright more and more in. A-Chain still has a lock on that receiving role, but Mostert was getting third down work last week, which I thought was sort of interesting. And he has been getting goal line touches here and there. I probably don't want to start him this week. I'd really prefer not to, but again, roster dependent, 14 team league, or maybe you're really banged up. I could see it. I would rather not to. He's closer to a sit for me than a start, but that's sort of what the tricky decision tier is. That's what I got.
Yeah. I guess let's go back to Ted's Devon A-Chain watch here. Last week, Mostert didn't get a single carry against the Rams. All of his work was receiving. A-Chain got the majority of the carries, and Jalen Wright worked in. I think we're getting pretty close here. I don't know what's going to happen with Mostert, but I think that A-Chain's 50 to 60% of the carries are kind of locked in, plus his involvement in the receiving game, right? I don't think that's exclusively him that's going to be getting that receiving work. I think that if Mostert pops up, it could be in that. But yeah, I think Mostert's getting pretty close to a sit here for me. Then for the Raiders, I'm just interested to see if Gardner Minshew can make it through the whole game. Antonio Pierce loves pulling that guy more than anything else in the world. He gets up in the morning, he sets his alarm. The first thought when he crawls out of bed is, how am I going to find a way to blame Gardner Minshew today? So we'll see. We saw Desmond Ritter the last time the Raiders were playing. Let I don't know. If you're pulling your quarterback because you want to see what Desmond Ritter has to offer, you're screwed. You're screwed. Not good. All right, next we got I think this might be one of the games of the week. We'll see. We got the Baltimore Ravens going into Pittsburgh to play the extremely overrated Steelers. The Ravens have an implied team total of 25.75 points. The Steelers have an implied team total of 22.75 points. For the Ravens, we're starting Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, Derrick Henry, and Zay Flowers, and we're sitting Rashad Bateman and Deontay Johnson. Then for the Steelers, we are starting Mr. Unlimited. We're starting George Pickens. We're sitting Najee. We're sitting Jalen Warren, and then we're tricky decisioning the Muth. So let's start with the Ravens first. I think that's going to be. I'm going to have less to say on the Ravens. So Lamar and Henry, we don't even have to tell you guys at this point, right? Like top three at their position, locked in, matchup proof. I would say I can't think of a single situation where they would ever not be in your starting lineup. Mark Andrews, he's quietly came around here over the past couple weeks. I think he's been double digits. Is it the past 3 weeks straight, Yanni?
He might have been like 7 points the week before. He's had 2 good weeks, and he's had like 5 of his last 6 weeks. He's been a top 3 tight end.
He's starting to get in the end zone, though, is another big one,
Oh,
right? He's
oh,
starting to get in the end zone. I think that if you were a believer in the tightrope surgery kind of hampering Andrews early in the season, this would kind of be the section of the season we'd start to see him speeding up a
yep.
little bit, right? We're seeing him be involved. I mean, this is what John Harbaugh said about Andrews, right? He said he's going to have games. He's going to have games where he shows up and he's getting targets and getting a lot of work, right? I think that in these important matchups that have the potential to be close, right? That's kind of where you're going to see Andrews pop a little bit more. I really like him in this spot against a Steelers team that surrenders yards. Then Zay Flowers, his season has been really up and down, right? Like I think out of the last 5 weeks, he has 3 games over 100 yards, and then he has like a 4 pointer and like a 5 pointer, right? So there are certain weeks where he's just kind of schemed out of the game. I think he'll do fine here, though. Still a great player. He's got Joey Porter Jr. on him, most likely. I think that he'll be able to have success against Joey Porter. We'll see, though. Then we're sitting Bateman and Deontay. This one's kind of interesting, right? Because Bateman has been getting a lot of run lately. Ever since Deontay Johnson came to the Ravens, Bateman has been getting work down the field a little bit more. He's been working very clearly as the wide receiver too. How long that lasts, we do not know. I think that his lack of volume early in the season, coupled with the idea that Harbaugh has said they want to work in Deontay Johnson a little bit more into the offense, makes both of them just kind of like we're a little unsure in what's not a great defensive matchup. And if the Ravens get up big, I would see them like trying to hammer the rock here with Derrick Henry. So I wouldn't start either of those guys. I would prefer to start Bateman to Deontay Johnson this week if you put a gun to my head. But you could probably do better in your flex spot, I think. Then for the Steelers, let's start with Najee and Jalen Warren. The Ravens have by far the number one rush defense in the NFL right now. They are just stuffing guys at the line and forcing teams to throw on them. with Jalen Warren being healthy, right? It's starting to look like a 60-40 split in this backfield with Najee getting 60% of the work, Jalen Warren getting 40% of the work. Najee is already kind of like not the fastest or most talented guy. He's a large fella who falls in the end zone and gets the usage. 60% of the usage against the number one rush defense in the league, though, that's not super appealing to me. I think that he would earn tricky decision if Jalen Warren was out or something, right? And Jalen Warren 40% of the work against the number one rushing defense, like at that point, I think you're counting on dump offs to the flat and like looking for the Justice Hill type of performance, right? I just don't see it here. Youth is a tricky decision. He got in the end zone last week. I think it was three catches for like 13 yards and a touchdown. So he got like 8 points. It's just the production is not consistent enough. He's not getting looked at enough, I think, to be considered a locked in start. I will say though, this Ravens team, they're second worst in the league against the pass. In theory, how you beat this team is you throw on them, and I think Muth is by far the second best weapon on the team. So I kind of like him as a tricky decision this week, especially at tight end. Like I think that low to mid end tight end one this week. George Pickens, he's been getting you there the past couple weeks. His production has been really improving since Russ has taken over. Is that just because of the style of quarterback that Russ is? Is George Pickens finally turning a corner? I don't know for sure. I think that George Pickens is talented, right? And this Ravens secondary, this is how you beat them. George Pickens is by far the best wide receiver that the Steelers have. If they're going to throw the ball and score points, I think a large portion of that goes to him. I think ECR has George Pickens as their number 6 wide receiver on the week. I'm not that bullish on him, but I think that low end wide receiver one is absolutely in the cards here. Then last but not least, Mr. Unlimited. Listen, man, I think it's fool's gold personally. I think that you know he has like I believe he has 6 touchdowns on the year, which is one less than Kenny Pickett had all of last year, right? So in certain ways, Russ is getting the Steelers offense moving like they hadn't with Justin Fields or Kenny Pickett. I believe they've averaged 30 points per game with Russ as the quarterback. Does that mean that Russ is a good quarterback? I don't think so still. But you have to look at those numbers, right? And you have to look at the defensive matchup that is exclusively the Ravens are going to be asking them to pass, the Steelers to pass on them, right? I believe Kyle Hamilton, I haven't checked his injury status, but he went down with a major injury on Thursday night, or at least it looked like non-contact, looked gnarly. I wouldn't be shocked if he doesn't go. He's a key member of that secondary. You could do worse than Russ this week. Is it possible that he goes out there and just lays a big old turd? Yeah, I think that's totally in the cards. I think that the Ravens, if they can pressure him, he might be in trouble, right? But based on the production, how the team has looked with him in there in the matchup, I begrudgingly will start Mr. Unlimited. I won't. I don't have him on any rosters, but for those of you managers out there that are streaming a quarterback, you could probably do worse, I guess. Thoughts on this one, Yanni? Was I kind enough to the Steelers?
Yeah, you were actually that was actually totally fair. What? So just a few things I did check while you were talking practice reports. Kyle Van Noy and Kyle Hamilton have not practiced this week for the Ravens. So that is a really big hit. That is their primary pass rusher and their primary corner that might not go this week. So in an already pass funnel defense that's really underperforming this year, to me, like Russ and Pickens are just a smash, dude, especially if you stack them in DFS. Like I have a Kyler roster that is second place in the league. It's playing for first place this week, and I will be rolling Russell Wilson out there. And then Najee Harris has not participated yet this week in practice. I was not aware of that. I was just checking while Ted was talking because I was curious about a few things. I'm sure Ted can weigh in with his opinion on it. To me, if Najee doesn't go and you have Jalen Warren in there, with Jalen Warren's pass catching ability and with the way that the game script should be going, I'm actually totally comfortable. Jalen's instantly a sort of tricky decision to me and may very well be like a start in full PPR. I think in full PPR, there's a good chance he's going to see 6 to 7 passes targets if he's the only running back in the game. Even just like garbage third down and 15 dump off passes, he might get 2 or 3 of. Just keep an eye out. If Najee's out, I actually think I like Jalen Warren, especially in full PPR this week. I don't know. What do you think of Jalen without Najee?
Well, I mean, in our league, right? I have a Jalen Warren roster, and
Yeah,
right now I have DJ Moore penciled in my flex. If Najee was out, I would roll Warren. So I
I would
mean,
do.
I
I
would
would do.
say low to mid flex. There's
Yeah,
definitely stuff to like, right? Like I think that if Jalen Warren has 100% of the carries in this game or is the primary back, it would be like how
yeah,
Austin Eckler looks
yeah.
on the Redskins.
Okay, Colts at Jets should be really interesting. The return of Anthony Richardson. The Colts have an implied team total of 20 on the road. Jets with an implied team total of 23.5 at home. Been a very bizarre season for two teams that people probably thought were in the running for at the minimum wild card, if not, winning a playoff game at home this year. Look, for the Colts, again, it's going to look like this when Anthony Richardson is starting probably for the rest of the year for us. You know the deal. The receivers take a huge step back with AR. He's throwing it under, I believe his completion rate's either right around 50% or under 50% this year. They don't scheme layup throws for him. Maybe they do some adjusting with that. I know there was some commentary on Colts Twitter about why does Joe Flacco get layup throws and Anthony Richardson does not. It's actually sort of interesting. I wonder if Steichen, I mean, he's a competent offensive mind, right? I wonder if they bring that in. But the way we're treating it, okay, start Jonathan Taylor, start him every week with confidence. Fantastic player, currently number 10 in the all-time yards per carry list in the NFL. Sit the wide receivers. A little bit of back and forth between me and Ted about what to do with Anthony Richardson this week. For me, he is much closer to a sit than a start. The Jets defense has been bad. They've hemorrhaged yards on the ground. A few teams have really gone off against them. They've had a few good weeks too. I don't know what to make of that. I think Anthony Richardson should be picked up off all waiver wires. I think we all know that Anthony Richardson is capable of cranking out 30-point weeks. What I don't know is why that's not actualizing on the field. The potential certainly there, though. On any of my rosters with two QBs, I went to try to go grab him as my backup quarterback, right? And I think you should too. For this week, I would much rather not start him. But look, if you have Kyler on bye, and you need to roll someone out there, I think he should have enough of a floor with the rushing and with the general just Jets defense hasn't been great. So tricky decision. For the Jets, I know Breece Hall has been down the last few weeks. I still think this is absolutely one of the best fantasy assets in the whole game. I expect him to have a really strong finish for the season. This is a very soft defense. So Hall and Wilson, I mean, they're locked in. I think Wilson is the wide receiver. It's either 4, 5, or 6, and I don't remember since Adams came over. He's really had some incredible weeks. Obviously, had the probably highlight of the year so far this year catch. So you're starting both those guys with confidence. And if you need a QB streamer this week, I actually like Rodgers a lot this week. Especially if the Colts can keep it competitive. If the Colts can force them to have to put up points here, I think you get, again, not a huge spike week, but I think you get a good 16, 17, maybe 18, 19, 20 out of Rodgers. So he's a start, certainly relative to what he's been this year. We're sitting Conklin. Conklin had that little stretch where he was a fantasy viable asset, and then Adams completely ruined that. It's done. It's gone forever. And then Devontae Adams apparently dealing with an illness and a minor, I think it was a wrist injury. I don't recall. And he's had 2 very average weeks, 1 fantastic week with the Jets. I like the matchup enough. A lot of rosters that took him, you probably took him anywhere from pick 25 to pick 35. So there are going to be rosters where he's going to be your flex or your wide receiver too, and that's just what you have to do. But I don't know how big of a week we have here. I think this profile is like a big Hall and Garrett Wilson game.
Yeah, I mean, ever since DeForest Buckner and Kenny Moore came back, this Colts defense, they are playing a little bit better, right? Like I think they only gave up 21 to the Vikings, and they were really in that game against the Bills. Like they were leading at halftime, surprisingly. So I don't think that this defense is the smash matchup that it was earlier in the year. I still think they're a gettable matchup, though, right? Devontae Adams being a tricky decision for us on the New York Jets has nothing to do with Devontae Adams, the player. It unfortunately has to do with Aaron Rodgers, the player. I'm shocked. I'm surprised I didn't see Rodgers on start. I probably would have argued about that. I would not. I would only start Rodgers in Superflex this week personally, with the Colts defense looking a little bit better, right? Like I don't know, man. You can do it if you want to. I think it's borderline though at best. Then for the Colts, I wouldn't be shocked here. I fought for this. Free Tendies fantasy community, I fought for Anthony Richardson in the tricky decision. Is it because my underdog roster roster desperately needs him to be good in the last month so I can make it to the advance rate? Maybe, maybe. But listen, like it's all about rushing upside. Anthony Richardson, when he's played his best football, is running the ball in the end zone, right? This Jets defense is not what they used to be. Sauce Gardner is playing so bad. He's getting talked shit on so much on Twitter, he deleted all his social media accounts. It would not shock me. We've seen it with Bryce Young already this year. With a struggling rookie quarterback having 2 weeks to sit back, I would not be surprised to see Anthony Richardson's best performance of the season here. To me, I would start him. I depending on what your situation is, right? Like I have a roster with Caleb Williams and Geno Smith on it. If Anthony Richardson was available, I would start him over either of those options. Um, I really like his chances this week. I think that it could be a good back half of the season for the Colts. Maybe I'm just a sucker for Shane Steichen and Jonathan Taylor and like the theory of what the Colts could be, but I think they could be a playoff team, maybe, with the way the AFC is kind of wide open at the bottom there. All right, next we got God, I'm gonna love this one. We got the Seahawks going into Levi's to play the Niners. The Seahawks are 0-6 in their last six against the 49ers. You are our little brothers. You guys suck. The Seahawks have an implied team total of 21 points, and the Niners have an implied team total of 27.5 points. For the Seahawks, we're starting Ken Walker and we're starting DK Metcalf. We're sitting Geno, and we're STDing Jackson Smith Najigba and Tyler Lockett. Then for the Niners, Yanni had everyone on the slides, but I feel like the positional players have changed a little bit now, so it was important to say all their names. Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, Debo Samuel, Jawan Jennings, and George Kittle, all locked in starts for us, and then we're STDing Slick Ricky Pearsall as a DFS option. So let's start with the Niners first. It was a weird one against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on Sunday. The Niners barely escaped with the win. Jake Moody missed 3 field goals. The Niners muffed a punt. It was a 16. There was a 16-point swing in that game due to special teams. That being said, though, even though the red zone offense still wasn't where it needed to be, Brock Purdy had an elite game. Threw for 350, 2 touchdowns. That throw to George Kittle in the corner of the end zone with the toe tap, that was, I think, one of Brock Purdy's top 5 throws in his career. Absolutely unreal. I think that he's playing really well, right? And this Seahawks defense can be used and abused. So feel really good about Brock here. He's inside my top 10 this week. Christian McCaffrey, I think that last week, right? I made a point to put Christian McCaffrey on the tricky decision list, and I made sure to say I think he's going to get a reduced workload here. I think in between 10 to 12 touches is where I had him. I failed to recognize that Kyle Shanahan, when he has Christian McCaffrey, loves nothing more than to give him the ball. He wasn't as efficient against the Buccaneers, right? Like I don't know. I think he's probably shaking off rust right now, but even though he only had like 30 or 40 rush yards, he still had 80 yards in the passing game. That's what CMC is. Elite fantasy asset. Roll him out here against a bottom 5 unit against the run. Debo, he didn't have a great one last week, but he got enough work. I really like his chances here. He broke the game open against the Seahawks the last time they played. Debo gets up for these matchups. I love him in this spot. Jawan Jennings now running as the X receiver. Basically, he is the Brandon Ayuk replacement. Kyle Shanahan said until the rest of the season, and he's doing really well in that role. He was the leading receiver on Sunday. I think he had like 9 catches or something. Heads up player. He's an absolute stud. I think that if Jawan Jennings was a full time starter, he'd be in the conversation for one of these monster wide receiver contracts that are getting handed out. And then George Kittle, tight end 1 on the year. He doesn't always get you there with the volume, but guy has a nose for the end zone like nobody else at the tight end position right now in big spots because Jawan Jennings isn't as much of a secret weapon now as he used to be. I think Brock is looking at Kittle a lot in those big spots. Love him here in this spot. Then Ricky Pearsall, right? He had the long touchdown last week. He's now effectively operating as the slot wide receiver. He's doing the Jawan thing. I think he's still kind of ramping up, right? It was only like his second or third game last week, and he had the impact play. I like his chances here. I mean, just based on the volume, right? I think that his best case scenario is 4 or 5 targets, but we'll see what he does with them, right? It's enough to be a tricky decision, especially in DFS against a soft defense. Probably be cheap. I don't hate the pick here. Then for the Seahawks, Ken Walker. I mean, he's a good player. He's a talented guy. I think that the Seahawks line is very bad though, and they're going up against the top 10 rush defense in the San Francisco 49ers. Will the Seahawks get down big and have Geno Smith throw another 50 times like we saw in the first matchup? I'm not sure, but there's not enough running backs I would slot ahead of Kenneth Walker to not have him as a start this week. DK Metcalf returning from the MCL. I think that you just have to start him here, right? Charvarius Ward, he may or may not play this week. I got that wrong last week. I thought Charvarius was going to play. He did not. He's questionable to be back this week, dealing with the death of his daughter. DK usually has big games against the Niners, though. DK understands the magnitude of this rivalry and the ownership the Niners have over the Seahawks, and he always brings his best to try and beat us. It never works out for him. Sometimes he gets thrown out of the game and throws tantrums, but I like I like the spot for him here. We're sitting Geno. Geno just struggles against the Niners, man. He looks really bad against them. The Niners' young rookies, Malik Mustafa and Bernardo Green, have been playing amazing football right now. Geno, I don't know. He could get you there from volume if the Seahawks go down a lot, right, in garbage time. But I would say explore your options at the quarterback position if you have other ones. Then we have JSN and Lockett as tricky decisions. Lockett, I'm not really even going to cover that much. I couldn't even tell you when Lockett's going to show up on a given week, right? He's a much better best ball guy than he is a weekly fantasy league guy. I think the more important conversation here, though, is JSN. He had the explosion week against the Rams before the bye. So now we're coming out of the bye, right? Traditionally, or I guess not traditionally, but at least this season, he has not had his best games when DK is also playing. He kind of plays second fiddle or third fiddle sometimes if Lockett has one of his weird games. Will he get more work here, though, because the Seahawks liked what they saw against the Rams? I think it's possible. Um, I don't know, though, right? Like, I think that DK is going to command a lot of the work here. I think that, the Seahawks should be down. I don't hate the start. I don't love it either, though. I have one league. My wide receivers are Zay Flowers, Calvin Ridley, and JSN, and I started Ridley over JSN. So, like, in my opinion, he's a rock solid flex, maybe a low end too. Just kind of depends on your evaluation of the player. Thoughts on this one, Yanni? You excited to go 7-0 against the Seahawks in the last seven?
I am excited. I do feel good about this one. I know it's a division rivalry game. I just think there's a difference in the physicality and the talent between these two teams that really was not the case for years, and it certainly is now. Yeah, I mean, just a few things to tag onto this. I do. Now I'm biased because I'm a huge JSN fan. I've been a fan since college. I was obsessed with him like coming out in the draft, and you want so badly for those biases to be confirmed. And you have to be really careful with that, right? Because then you're just like a jackass that there's nothing going on and you're trying to look for all this stuff that's not really happening so you can feel good about your opinion. That's really a silly place to be. That is where I'm at with JSN, by the way, for sure, without a doubt. And look, he had like one of the 10 or 15 best games that any wide receivers had since he came in the NFL last time we saw him on the field. And if he doesn't have that penalty called on the big play over the middle, like he might have had like a 200-yard, 2-touchdown game. That's there are not a lot of wide receivers in football. I don't care what kind of usage they get that have that sort of upside. You have to remember who this guy was producing in that wide receiver core with when he was going off. Like this is a tremendously talented football player. I'm guessing that coming out of the bye, second year, but he missed a lot of his first year. You could argue it profiles more like a rookie's development arc. I'm going to guess that he gets the full wide receiver 2 run we have not seen him get this year. I don't know. And in any case, even if he does, Renardo Green is currently the 3rd highest ranked corner in the NFL. Malik Mustafa is the 5th highest ranked safety in the NFL. And Diamador Lenore is one of the best slot corners, maybe the best slot corner in football. Extremely tough matchup for him either way. But I'm really curious to see his route participation rates and all that sort of stuff. Keep an eye on that. It's going to be really important to prognosticate the rest of his season here. And then Jawan, just a quick note about Jawan Jennings. We begged you guys to go and get him off the wire at multiple points this year. We begged you guys to go and get him off the wire at multiple points last year when it looked like Debo or Ayuk were going to miss games. In half PPR, he has started 3 games, and I believe his total in those 3 games in half PPR is around 64 points over 3 weeks. He currently has, behind only Jamar Chase, the second best game for a wide receiver on the season this year. It's not AJ Brown. It's not whoever, whatever other big names got. I ran out of steam quickly there. It's not AJ Brown. It's not Justin Jefferson. It's not Ross St. Brown. It is Jawan Jennings as the wide receiver 2 for the biggest game of the year this year. And actually, JSN has a top 5 game too. But so look, when you're averaging over 21 points a game in half PPR at wide receiver, Jawan Jennings is not a borderline guy. He's not a guy you want to be looking to rotate in and out of your roster, especially with their schedule the rest of the season. Jawan Jennings is a weekly starter. Make no mistake about it. Me and Ted have been on this thing for years. Niners fans have been on it for years. They know this is a kid who should be getting like 110 receptions, 1,100, 1,200 yards, 8 touchdowns a year. He would have been the Super Bowl MVP. He is one of the best wide receivers in football. Where he falls in that, I don't know. Is he a top 35 receiver? Is he a top 25 receiver? I really don't know. There are guys that are so much more physically talented than him. But in terms of a football player, in terms of a dude that blocks his ass off, that catches third down plays, that puts you in position for game-winning field goals, that goes off in the Super Bowl. I just want you guys to be aware that Jawan Jennings is a weekly starter, man. Get him in those lineups, start him with confidence, feel good about it, and ride him to a championship this year.
Nothing is going to feel better than the Niners beating the Seahawks this week and having them realize their 3-0 start was a complete mirage and their team is ass. Cannot wait for it.
Yeah. Okay, Falcons at the Broncos. Falcons with an implied team total of 21. This spread shocked me too, to be honest with you, when I saw it. But implied team total of 21 points on the road against the Broncos with an implied team total of 23.5. To me, that is very much a Sean Payton statistic. He has done so well with the budget deficit they're in, with the pick deficit they're in from the Russell Wilson thing, with the huge balls to move off of him. Even with the Bo Nix pick, looks like it's pretty good. This Broncos season has been a testament to how good they've been. And if the Chiefs don't get some dodgy refereeing like they always get at the end of last game, good chance they beat the Chiefs last week. So, look, Falcons are in for a tough game. They're in for a tough game against a tough defense. That's why we're being a little bit bearish on our Falcons starts this week. Bijan and Drake London, I don't think you're sitting them any given week. I can't imagine what your roster looks like if you're thinking about sitting Drake. Bijan, obviously not. I mean, he's unbelievable. He's a top 3 asset for the rest of the season. So start them both. Start them with confidence. I know Drake draws a tough matchup, but he's just been so damn good this year. I'm keeping him plugged in. We're going to sit Tyler Algier, and then your sort of tricky decisions are going to be Mooney, Pitts, and Kirk. Pitts has been inconsistent this year. Now, if Surtain really blanks London, does that bump up Mooney and Pitts? Probably, but am I going to project for that and tell you to start one of them? Absolutely no. Like if I had, Kate Otton's on bye this week. Tight end is so sticky. I highly doubt you're starting someone over Pitts. I highly doubt it. But for Mooney, there are a lot of guys. Like I would rather start Tillman to Mooney this week. I would rather start Waddle over Mooney this week. I know he's been good, but that's where I'm at. Jawan Jennings, it's not even close between Jawan Jennings and Mooney. So it's, you're working in that tier of guys, and I would take all of them over Mooney. But I look, Mooney's been so good this year, and Surtain may go one-on-one with London all game. That'll open up looks for him. So it's not like these guys are outright sits. They're just not the starts I would normally think they are every week. The Broncos are tough, man. They play really fundamentally sound football, and they've given all sorts of offense problems. And then for the Broncos, Nix is a start. The Falcons just got ripped the F up from Derek Carr. If Derek Carr is ripping you up, I think Bo Nix can too. Bo Nix offers just a little bit of rushing upside. He's actually been really solid as a passer lately. He was probably my least favorite quarterback in the class of all the big ones that went. But honestly, I think he's looked really good. A lot of that's probably Sean Payton, but they're playing with a talented, depleted team, and they're winning games and they're hanging in games. I think I really do have a lot of respect for what they're doing this year. And in fantasy, I think Bo Nix is a perfectly reasonable streamer. If you need to plug someone in for Kyler, for Baker, throw him in there. Sutton's he did it again this year, man. That forgotten, stupid round 10, 11, 12 pick that nobody wants on your team because he's old, because he's uninteresting, because he looks weird. He looks like Tiger Woods, kind of, right? A weird looking guy. There he is producing at a mid-range to high-end wide receiver 2 level with wide receiver 1 spike weeks and like a good floor, like a wide receiver 3 floor. Sutton's awesome, man. And in this matchup, start him with confidence. Again, sneaky little DFS stack if you want to do the Nick Sutton stack. And then estimate. This is sort of the projection from me and Ted, I guess. A little bit of risky business here, but this is what I think. Estime was the guy that this regime went and picked out for themselves. I know they drafted Jaleel last year. To me, it looks like that was the first game giving Estime full run. He looked really good. I saw him going from anything from $25 to $40 of fab in a lot of my leagues. Am I that bullish on him? I don't know. We're going to call him a start this week. This team hemorrhages yards. They hemorrhage points, right? I think very good chance he gets in the end zone. So I like all of it. Keep an eye on the usage, but to me, it does feel like they want to give someone the bulk of the work. And all year they've tried someone else and they keep falling short. Estime may be that guy, and we're going to treat him like he is this week. We're going to call him a start. We'll revise our take if not. And then on that note, you're sitting the other running backs. And I would really almost just rather not be rostering anyone but Estime at this point in the year.
Yeah. I actually don't have any feedback on this one. I don't know, Bo Nix is playing decently, right? I think this Falcons defense is massively underperforming. And I think, the Falcons just do they have a good one this week? It's hard for me to tell with Kirk at this point. Like if we're gonna see good Kirk or bad Kirk. It's too bad they can't play the Bucks like 18 times. Otherwise, he'd be MVP. All right, next we got the other premier matchup of the week: the Chiefs going into Buffalo to play the Bills. The Chiefs have an implied team total of 22 points, and the Bills have an implied team total of 24.5 points. For the Chiefs, we're starting Pat Mahomes, we're starting Travis Kelce, we're starting Kareem Hunt, and we're starting DeAndre Hopkins, and we're sitting Xavier Worthy. Then for the Bills, we're starting Josh Allen, James Cook, Khalil Shakir, and Dawson Knox. Full-blown start this week because Kincaid is likely out. And then we're going to tricky decision Amari Cooper. So we'll start with the Chiefs first. They're probably a little bit easier, right? Like when I say the names Pat Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Kareem Hunt, and DeAndre Hopkins, that sounds like an all-star 2017 fantasy football lineup. But that is what the Chiefs offense is at this point in time. And I don't know. I don't think this Bills defense is good enough to not be rolling out these guys with at least some level of confidence, right? Like Mahomes is the best player in the world. Like, has his production been the best player in the world this year? No. But in a big spot like this, what do the Chiefs do? They find ways to win. I mean, I would probably have Mahomes between my QB 5 to 8 this week. That's roughly where I'd put him. Don't love the spot, but I just can't say no to the guy. Travis Kelce, same deal, right? At this point in his career, he's got like his B to C game, but he gets up for these big spots, right? In all likelihood, I think the Chiefs, if they win this game here, they probably lock in the number one seed in the AFC, I would guess, and they get to do the Arrowhead Invitational again. So I would not be shocked to see a huge Kelsey game here with all of the injuries. He's just kind of forced into a primary role, and this would be a game I think he would do well in. Kareem Hunt, I think that I don't know. He's kind of fallen off a little bit in my eyes from a production standpoint the last couple weeks. But this Bills defense is undersized. They can be run at. They have been run at effectively. I think Jonathan Taylor had like 120 yards on this team. I think that he had like 100 in the first half even. He carved them up. Like teams will just run the ball down the Bills' throat. It's what they're good. It's like how you attack this defense. So I think Kareem Hunt could be in for a good one here. Then DeAndre Hopkins. He's not sexy at this point in his career anymore. He looks like he's old and slow. I said to Yanni last week, but like he has just the softest Velcro hands in the world, right? Like he's not going to create a bunch of separation, but I don't think there's a steadier pair of hands in the league. And when you have Patrick Mahomes, who has the ability to place balls like no other, right? And he's effectively running as the wide receiver one, probably behind Kelsey. I would say I like his chances here this week. I don't have him as like a wide receiver one, but I think I'd feel very confident with him as like a mid to low end two this week. Then we're sitting Xavier Worthy. The production just hasn't been there, right? Like he, in theory, he should be getting a lot more work with the entire Chiefs team being injured, right? And he should be producing at like a value at his ADP. It just has not that has not been the case for him. I think he's an extremely talented guy. I think he's very fast. I think that if he works on a couple things, that you could see him pop up near the end of this year or maybe next year. He would be a good value, but as of right now, the production just is not there. I can't tell you to start him. Maybe scoop him off of waivers if he's there as a speculative ad. But that's all I really have for him. Then for the Bills, Josh Allen and James Cook at this point, Batman and Robin, no brainers. I can't think of a situation you wouldn't start them either, right? Khalil Shakir, he's effectively been the most productive wide receiver on this team, with a high second round draft pick in Keon Coleman and a Amari Cooper that the Bills traded for. He's a solid player, man. I think I called him like the luxury Wandale before we hit the record button. He's very good. He's getting a lot of work. You might as well, right? Then Dawson Knox is a full blown start. The theory here is that the tight end usage for the Buffalo Bills, they use their tight end a lot, but a lot of times Knox and Kincaid kind of eat into each other's work, right? So if Kincaid misses and Dawson Knox has the monopoly over the tight end usage in this game, I think that he's in for a low end tight end one performance here, maybe high end two. Just use your judgment, but like say for example you're a Sam Laporta manager and you need like a replacement for this week, right? Or you're Kate Otten manager, you need to fill in for the bye week. I don't hate him in this spot. Then Amari Cooper, tricky decision. I believe he has a wrist and he was a limited. No, he was DNP this week, so we don't even know if he's going. If he does go, I think tricky decision based on the fact that we haven't seen the production from him yet in Buffalo. He's been a spotty performer in general, like just on the season, whether it was in Cleveland or in Buffalo. But you have that being attached to Josh Allen upside. The team traded for him. They're clearly high on him, and I think they eventually want him to be the number one pass catcher on the team. Just don't know if it's this week. If he plays though, you could do worse at like a flex spot. What do you think, Yanni? Who do you got in this one?
I have to think if I'm going to put them on my picks for next week. I'm just in this weird spot with the Chiefs where I'm going to say that they should be favored every game, and I'm going to pick them every game until proven otherwise. You know what I mean? Like, they're just too good. They don't lose football games. I don't, but just sort of an interesting meta narrative that I think about this game. Worthy and Keon Coleman, Xavier Legette, and Ricky Pearsall and Ladd McConkey all went within the same like 5 to 7 pick range in the draft. They were all squished at the end of the first round, early second round. And Pearsall on most people's draft boards was a late second, early third round pick. And I know the pick got banned. Sort of interesting as the season plays out. I wonder if the Niners didn't get the best selection in that range. Pearsall and Ladd's a really good player, and Legette has a lot of upside. But as far as Worthy and Coleman, who went right before and right after Pearsall, respectively, it's just sort of interesting. I think the Niners may have found the gem of that range in the draft. We'll see. But no, nothing fantasy-wise, nothing interesting.
For the record, I got the Bills in this one. I think because if the Chiefs beat the Bills here, like they might go undefeated on this. Like
Yep.
this is really the best chance to take them down. And like if the
Yep.
Chiefs go 17-0, like that would be the worst undefeated season of all time, I think. But they're just so well coached and situationally great. Like you'd have to tip your cap to them, but I have a hard time thinking it holds up.
Yeah. Yeah. The Chiefs. All right. Bengals at Chargers. Bengals with an implied team total of 23 points. Chargers with an implied team total of 24.5. Another spread I thought was interesting. I thought it was interesting. Vegas has given the Chargers 24.5 points and the 1.5 spread, but the Bengals defense has been really soft this year. And honestly, look, I don't know if anyone ever. I mean, I guess I did see some doubt of what Herbert is as a player, but certainly not from me and old Teddy boy. Dude, Herbert's an amazing player, and maybe that number is more a reflection of him really coming into his own here. Like he's doing this with Will Disley, Josh Palmer, Quentin Johnson, Ladd McConkey, and he's putting out these like 250, 300 yard, really efficient performances. So maybe that's more what it reflects. I'm really impressed with Herbert this year. And I'm dude, this is a game where the really both teams need this in the worst way. Both of these teams look like they're going to be competing for a wild card. They're very possibly competing for a wild card against each other. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see fireworks. And I know the Bengals are a bottom 10 defense and the Chargers are a top 10 defense. But look, we're projecting the Bengals here to do just fine. Burrow, Brown, Chase, those are your big starts. I mean, again, I know it's a hard defensive matchup. I believe, how many targets did Chase Brown have last week? I think it was 12. I think he had 12 targets. That sounds way too high. Maybe I'm wrong
I
about
think
that,
it
but I'm
might be
pretty.
8. I think it was 8.
I'm sorry, Brown. Yeah, I'm talking about Chase Brown, not Jamar Chase. Yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know how many targets he had, but it was like absurd. The guy had like a 25% target share.
looking it up right
Um,
now.
yeah, check it out while I'm talking. And then Higgins, his agent put out that report that he's not coming back to the Bengals this year, which basically means F you, I'm not hurrying back from the injury. That's going to affect it a little bit. If Higgins goes, he's a locked in start. If Higgins doesn't go, Gesicki moves from a sort of tricky decision to a start. What we've been seeing is when Higgins is out, Gesicki ends up working into the slot. So we have Gesicki as a sort of tricky decision. We're sitting the other tight ends, and we have Higgins as a start. If Higgins is out, move Gesicki to a start, okay? And then for the Chargers, only two guys that we know will get the work, and that's going to be Herbert and Dobbins. Herbert is, I would advise everyone to go get him off your wires. If you need a streamer this week, stream him. He is my favorite QB streamer this week. Dobbins been consistent as gravity, man. Despite all the injuries, despite everything that would have worked against him, he has been in there. And then our sort of tricky decisions are going to be a lad who saw a season low in usage last week. Disley, who's just been seeing targets closer to a sit. There's only two teams on bye this week. There's not really tight end injuries besides Laporta. I would hope you can do better than Disley, but 14-team league or something, sure. And then Quentin Johnson, probably more of a DFS player, or a 14-team league play. I don't think anyone in redraft is seriously looking at flexing him. But he's had enough spike weeks this week that he deserves to be listed there. And again, even Ladd, like I like this matchup this week. So I would say Ladd is closer to a start for me, and QJ is more of like a DFS flyer. But it should be a lot of passing. I think this one has the chance to be like the Chargers' first real shootout this year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have a lot of things on this one. First of which, I just tried to drop Geno Smith for Justin Herbert in our league. He was already scooped up. I would have done that in a second. Um, okay, so I think this has kind of flown under the radar a little bit, but this Bengals rush defense has actually been playing really well since the Cleveland Browns game. They're limiting guys. Like, I think Saquon didn't have like an amazing game against them. Derrick Henry had one of his lower performances of the year, and Nick Chubb kind of was Nick Chubbing, I guess, with his bionic leg. It was his first week back. But all of that's to say that I think that the Bengals might have some success stopping J.K. Dobbins here, and that might force Justin Herbert into like just airing it out to try and keep up with this Bengals team that I think is for sure going to score. So yeah, I love the Herbert start this week. I think that definitely top 10. I might have him at like closer to 5 is where I
Yeah.
would put him this week. I really think this is going to be a huge matchup, right? It's what this Bengals team does. They kind of play down to their competition, but in these like huge premier like matchups, they kind of live up to the billing, right? And this is like Sunday night. The Bengals really are like truly scratching and clawing to get their way back into this. I think the Chargers are almost locked into a wild card spot at this point, personally. So I think it might be a little bit more important to the Bengals. I think they're going to give their absolute best effort here. That's all I really had on that. The Herbert bullishness, and I would have taken him over Geno. I can't believe I missed that. Brian took him. Honk shoe.
Yep.
Scumbag.
Yep. So I'm checking real quick. Yeah. So Chargers 6-3, Bengals 4-6.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man. If the Bengals are 4-6 behind the 7-2 Steelers and the 7-3 Ravens, one of them is going to advance to 8-3 this week. Yeah, that's a borderline must win for the Bengals. I expect a huge offensive showing from them.
Mm-hmm. All right, then we got the Monday night game. We have the Houston Texans going into Jerry World to play the poor, pitiful Cowboys. Will it be Trey Lance or will it be Cooper Rush this week? We'll see. I'm holding my breath for that one. The Texans have an implied team total of 25 points. The Cowboys have an implied team total of 17.5 points. For the Texans, we're starting C.J. Stroud. We're starting Joe Mixon. We're starting Nico Collins. Welcome back. I believe he came off the injury report this week. He's a full go. He will be playing in this one. And we're starting Tank Dell. Then we're STDing Dr. Schultz. Then for the Cowboys, our only start for you is CD, but more on that in a minute. We're going to tricky decision Rico Dowdle and Jake Ferguson. They were sitting the rest in the garbage pile. Let's just start with the Cowboys. I think this is more a compelling conversation, right? Like, so this Cowboys team, in my view, it is like probably a bottom five team in the league that's left. It's the worst roster that they've had in a long time. They're banged up, and Cooper, like you're missing Dak Prescott, you're missing like the captain of your offense, right? And when you build your entire team around the connection between two highly paid players in Dak and CD, if one of them goes down, like you're screwed, right? So we're begrudgingly starting CD here. He's going to be matched up with Derek Stingley, and is the combination of Cooper Rush or Trey Lance going to be able to feed him enough to be that wide receiver one you drafted? I don't think so. I think this is looking more like Garrett Wilson did last year, where you probably have like an okay wide receiver two at this point, but not a lot to like there. And then we're going to tricky decision Rico Dowdle and Jake Ferguson. This Texans team did a fantastic job of stuffing the Lions running game. If you can stuff the Lions running game for the better part of 3 quarters, I don't know how the Cowboys are going to have success here. I think they're just going to get blown off the ball, bullied at the in the trenches here. You could start Dowdle if you're feeling like he might fall into the end zone in garbage time, or I don't know, catch a dump off pass and do something with it. But I lean sit towards him. Then Jake Ferguson, same deal, right? I think that the Cowboys are probably going to be down big in this game. They're probably going to be forced to throw, and Ferguson should be running the easy routes for a quarterback to hit. I think that if it's Trey or Cooper Rush, either of them would be happy to take an easy completion. I think Ferguson's range of outcomes is somewhere between 5 and 10 points this week. You can start him if you need to, but if you find a better option, right? Like I wouldn't mind putting Ferguson on the pine this week. Then for the Texans, I think the big story about this Houston Texans team is going to be how the offense looks with Nico Collins back in the mix, right? So I don't know. This Texans team, they've just looked off without him. Like CJ has had some of his least effective games. I guess he's still a good player, right? But he just hasn't looked the same as we saw him look last year. We'll see how much Nico Collins moves the needle. But on that note, right, this is a bottom of the barrel Cowboys unit. Even though they got Micah Parsons back, Demar Demarian Overshawn, I don't even know how to say his name, but he went down with a non-contact last week. He's going to be out. This Cowboys team is a mess. So we feel good about CJ this week. Same with Joe Mixon. He's the slowest, best running back I've ever seen. Elite field vision. I think the Cowboys, like I was mentioning, are just going to get blown off the ball here at the line of scrimmage. He should have success. Mixon's almost a guarantee to get in the end zone, I think. The Nico Collins factor, we'll see if he's still CJ's favorite target. I I tend to think that he's going to have a huge one here. I think CJ is going to be over the moon to have his guy to be just throwing the balls all day too. And then Tank Dell, without Stephon Diggs in the mix, Tank Dell has been a much more effective fantasy option. I hope you traded for him. This is going to be the part of the season where he's very effective and can win you leagues. And then Dr. Schultz is a tricky decision. It's just because there's one less mouth to feed, right? Without Diggs in there, Schultz is probably like the third option in the passing game, unless you really like John Mechie, right? Or Bobby Trees. I think Dalton Schultz is a safer bet, especially at a dry position going against like a bottom five unit on defense. You could do worse. Streaming the position, I think he might be a decent. I don't know. DraftKings, they only do like Monday night, like it's a single game standalone, right, Yanni?
Yeah, I mean, you can do, there are slates where you can do every game that week. Like, they go for 4 days. But yeah, typically it's a showdown captain mode
Yeah.
where
I
you get, 5 points for the captain.
I like him more in like the single game, like if you need a
Yeah.
discount player that could fall in the end zone versus like a fantasy start, but you could do worse. And that's gonna do it for us, I believe, right? Was that Monday? Yeah, that's Monday night.
Yep.
That's gonna do it for us. If you made it through the whole video, thank you. Please like, subscribe, hit the bell. It really helps the channel out. Question of the day for the audience: when you cook your pasta, if you're using Alfredo sauce, do you cook the Alfredo sauce with the pasta after it's been strained, or do you just pour on the Alfredo sauce afterwards?
Cold, cold, like out of the jar. Just pour it on.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. That's the controversial part. Yeah.
Yeah. So someone really freaked out about that. It's like I stabbed them. But anyways, let us know in the comments how you put your Alfredo sauce on your pasta, and we will catch you for the gambling episode.
Thanks, guys.